There is a very specific moment in the life of almost every person who has survived narcissistic abuse. It is a quiet moment on the outside, but on the inside, it feels like the ground has shifted under your feet, even if nobody else in the room notices a thing. It happens when the person who has been controlling how you see reality suddenly realizes something. They realize that you finally see them clearly, not the version they built for show, not the charm, not the wounded hero act, or the misunderstood partner, or the endlessly patient friend they pretended to be. You see the pattern now. You see the manipulation. You see the strategy hiding underneath all that affection. And in that instant, something changes behind their eyes. The illusion they worked so hard to protect has just cracked, and they know it. Maybe you felt it as a sudden chill in the room, or a strange pause in the middle of a conversation, or a flicker of something close to panic behind their usual calm face. Maybe you noticed it in something even smaller, a slight change in their tone, a hesitation before they answered, a look that lasted just a second too long. That moment is one of the most important and most dangerous moments in the entire story of narcissistic abuse. Understanding what happens next can completely change the direction of your healing. It is important because so much of what follows depends on how well you understand it. Survivors who recognize this moment for what it is are often able to protect themselves faster than those who do not. Before we continue, if you care about protecting your peace, reclaiming who you are, and understanding how manipulation really works, consider following this channel. Everything here is built on real psychological insight and trauma-informed thinking, along with the lived experience of survivors who are learning to trust themselves again. When you follow along, you give yourself steady access to knowledge that quietly rebuilds your inner world, one honest insight at a time. You also join a community of people choosing clarity over confusion, and choosing self-respect over self-doubt. Now let's go back to that pivotal moment. What happens inside a narcissistic person when they realize, the truth is not random at all? It follows a pattern that shows up again and again, even though it can look a little different from person to person, and even though the timing can vary depending on the individual and the situation. At the center of narcissistic behavior is a deep need to protect a carefully built self-image. That image depends heavily on how other people see them, and it needs constant maintenance to stay standing. So when you start to see through it, you stop reflecting back the version of them that keeps them feeling stable. In their mind, you become a threat. Not because you are cruel, not because you are aggressive, but because your clarity breaks the mirror they have been using to manage their fragile sense of self. And once that mirror cracks, the reaction is almost never calm. It tends to move through a series of stages, one after another, sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly. The first thing you may notice is that the very behaviors which once kept you confused start to get worse. Gaslighting becomes sharper, more frequent, and more creative. Suddenly, conversations you remember clearly get rewritten right in front of you. Things you documented get denied completely. Feelings you expressed get twisted into overreactions or imaginary wounds. You might find yourself questioning your own memory, even when you know exactly what was said and exactly what happened. This is intentional, whether or not it is fully conscious on their part. This escalation does not mean you are wrong. It means your accuracy has become something they cannot tolerate. The more clearly you understand what is happening, the harder they have to work to shake your perception, because your steady perception is the one thing charm alone cannot control. Alongside the gaslighting, you often see a wave of blame, shifting, and projection. Things they have done themselves suddenly get pinned on you. You become the manipulator, the cold one, the unstable one, the person who cannot let go of the past. You may hear the exact words you once used to describe their behavior, now being used to describe yours. This is not always a conscious lie. Often it comes from a deep psychological defense where they simply cannot accept the version of themselves that you are now seeing, so they mentally hand those traits over to you instead. It is an unconscious way of protecting their self-image by making you carry what they refuse to face. This can be one of the most disorienting parts of the entire process because it forces you to defend yourself against accusations that mirror the very harm you experienced. Then comes the performance of victimhood. This stage is especially disorienting because the person who hurt you starts acting like they are the one being destroyed. They might cry, they might speak softly, they might describe their own suffering in great detail, they might bring up their childhood, their stress, their fragile state of mind, their fear of losing you. They may talk about how misunderstood they feel, how hard they have tried, how much they have sacrificed, all while the actual harm they caused goes unmentioned. Real pain can exist inside a narcissistic person too, but the timing of this performance is what reveals its true purpose. It tends to appear right when accountability is getting close, right when your clarity is at its strongest, right when you are closest to walking away. The victim story is not necessarily a lie in their own mind, but it is a pattern that consistently shows up whenever their control is slipping, almost like a reflex rather than a plan. If playing the victim does not work, intimidation often takes its place. Sometimes this is loud and obvious, like raised voices, threats, or aggressive posturing. Other times it is quiet, like cold stares, long silences, ominous comments, or a sudden withdrawal of warmth that feels almost like punishment. The silent treatment especially is one of the most destabilizing tools out there because it triggers your nervous system's fear of abandonment, while also giving you no way to resolve anything. There is no conversation to have, no argument to settle, nothing to fix, just silence, stretched out until it becomes unbearable. It is a form of emotional pressure designed to make you doubt your own decision to finally see things clearly. Many survivors describe feeling as though they are being punished simply for noticing the truth. And then, almost strangely, the warmth comes back. This is the stage that confuses many survivors the most. After the anger, after the silence, after the cruelty, the narcissistic person may suddenly turn into the most loving version of themselves you have ever seen. This is often called hoovering, a word that describes how this behavior pulls you back into the relationship like a vacuum, sweeping you back into the same cycle. The compliments become bigger than ever. The apologies sound emotional, even rehearsed. The promises of change feel almost believable, especially if you have been longing to hear them. There might be gifts, big gestures, mentions of shared memories, or sudden moments of vulnerability that seem to confirm everything you once hoped they could be. This is intermittent reinforcement, and it is one of the strongest conditioning forces in human psychology. It is the same mechanism that keeps people pulling a lever on a slot machine, hoping for the next reward. Rewards that show up unpredictably after periods of pain create stronger emotional bonds than steady kindness ever could. This is why trauma bonds can feel almost chemical, almost gravitational, even after you fully understand what is happening. Knowing the truth does not automatically undo the conditioning. Understanding this matters because survivors often blame themselves for struggling to leave even after they see the truth clearly. They wonder why clarity has not set them free. They wonder why their heart still aches for someone their mind has already recognized as harmful. The answer is not weakness. The answer is that your nervous system has been shaped by months or years of unpredictable emotional patterns. It has learned to connect relief, hope, and connection with the very same person who caused the pain in the first place. This connection was built slowly, and it takes time to unbuild it as well. Healing takes more than understanding it in your head. It takes slow, patient work to retrain your body's response to that bond, one small step at a time. Meanwhile, outside the private relationship, another pattern often begins to unfold. Their focus on image starts to grow stronger. The narcissistic person becomes more and more concerned with how they look to others, mutual friends, family members, co-workers, or people online. You may notice subtle storytelling that paints them as the reasonable one and you as the difficult one. It can happen so gradually that people around you barely notice the shift. In more serious cases, this turns into a full smear campaign, where carefully shaped stories get spread through your shared circle of people. The goal is rarely simple revenge. The deeper goal is to control the narrative before your version of events has a chance to take root. If they can define you first, it becomes easier for people to dismiss your clarity later, even before you have said a single word in your own defense. This is often when survivors feel a deep sense of isolation, because people they once trusted may start treating them differently, sometimes without ever explaining why. It is painful. It is disorienting. And it is one of the most important times to remember that truth does not need everyone's agreement to still be true. Your reality does not become less real just because someone told a different story. Your healing does not depend on convincing anyone else of what happened. It depends only on knowing what you know and continuing to live in a way that matches that knowing, even when no one else confirms it for you. If any of this feels familiar, and you want to keep building the kind of inner clarity that manipulation cannot easily touch, take a moment to follow this channel. This space is made for survivors who are ready to move past confusion and into a deeper understanding of themselves, their patterns, and the psychology behind what they went through. Every video here is meant to help you reclaim a little more of the self that was quietly taken from you and rebuild it on ground that cannot be shaken again. Now let's turn our attention inward, because while the narcissistic person's behavior matters, what is happening inside you at this stage matters even more. When you first recognize the manipulation, the feeling is rarely pure relief. More often it is a strange mix of clarity and grief, awareness and confusion, validation and disorientation all at once. You might feel like you are waking up from a dream you cannot fully remember, with pieces of memory suddenly making sense in ways that are almost painful to sit with. This is normal. This is your mind reorganizing itself around a truth it was not safe to see before now. It takes time for your thoughts and feelings to catch up with each other. Clarity at first often feels frightening instead of empowering, because it asks you to grieve more than just the relationship. It asks you to grieve the version of reality you thought you were living in. You grieve the person you thought they were. You grieve the future you imagined together. You grieve the energy you gave and the years that went into something that was never quite what it seemed. You grieve the parts of yourself you had to shrink or twist just to keep the relationship working, the opinions you softened, the needs you silenced, the instincts you overrode. And underneath all of that, you may also grieve the version of yourself that existed before all of this reshaped you, the person you were before you learned to doubt your own mind. This grief does not mean you are weak or confused. It means you are processing something that was real and something that deserves to be acknowledged rather than rushed past. Alongside the grief, you might notice a strange wave of self-doubt, almost the opposite of what you would expect. You finally see the truth, and yet somehow you question yourself more than ever before, wondering if you are being too harsh, too sensitive, too quick to judge. This happens because long exposure to gaslighting teaches your nervous system to distrust its own signals. Even after your mind has connected all the dots, your body may still flinch at the idea of trusting what you feel. Healing this is not about forcing yourself into certainty. It is about gently and repeatedly choosing to believe yourself in small moments until self-trust becomes stable instead of something you have to force each time. This is also why writing things down becomes such a quietly powerful habit during recovery. Writing down events as they happen, keeping notes on conversations, recording your feelings in the moment, all of this creates an outside memory that cannot be rewritten by anyone else. Even a short note, a date, a few words about how you felt can become an anchor later when your memory of an event starts to feel uncertain. This is not about building a case against someone. It is about anchoring yourself in your own experience so that when manipulation tries to twist your memory, you have something solid to come back to. This habit is one of the most underrated tools in narcissistic abuse recovery because it slowly rebuilds the relationship between you and your own perception. As you keep healing, you will start noticing the difference between real accountability and manipulative performance. And learning this difference is one of the most freeing things you can develop. Real accountability is steady. It does not only show up when your access to them is at risk. It does not center their feelings over the harm that was caused. It does not demand instant forgiveness or ask you to forget. It shows up through changed behavior over time, through patience with your healing process, and through a willingness to sit with discomfort without pushing for quick resolution. It does not need an audience, and it does not disappear once the immediate crisis has passed. It continues quietly, without needing to be noticed or praised. Manipulative performance, on the other hand, is almost always urgent. It needs a reaction from you right away. It needs you to soften. It needs the door reopened. It uses vulnerability as a tool instead of as something honest, timed carefully to arrive exactly when it will have the most effect. Once you learn to feel that difference, the performance starts losing its power because you stop mistaking emotional intensity for emotional truth. You will also start recognizing cycles of temporary change that tend to follow moments of exposure. The narcissistic person may genuinely act differently for days, weeks, or even months. They may go to therapy, read books, use the language of healing, and seem transformed. For a while, it may even feel like real progress, and you may find yourself hoping that this time things truly are different. And then slowly, the old patterns creep back in, often quieter than before, often more polished. Often harder to name because now they have new language to hide behind. This is not always a deliberate trick. Sometimes the change is real but shallow, lasting only as long as it takes to regain access to you. True transformation is rare and slow. It does not announce itself, and it does not ask for credit. It simply unfolds quietly over years, without fanfare and without needing to be witnessed. While all of this is happening, protecting your nervous system matters just as much as anything else. Emotional regulation is not a luxury at this stage. It is a survival skill, something that supports every other part of your healing. Simple practices like slow breathing, grounding through your senses, gentle movement, time outdoors, real rest, and limiting overstimulation help your body remember what safety actually feels like. None of these practices need to be complicated or perfect. Even small, consistent moments of calm can make a real difference over time. You do not need to rush your healing. You need to give your body the conditions it needs to heal naturally. Healing moves in rhythms, not deadlines. Boundaries become another quiet pillar during this time. A boundary is not a wall, and it is not a punishment. It is simply a clear statement of what you will and will not take part in, held steady without needing the other person's approval. With narcissistic individuals, boundaries get tested constantly, sometimes through charm, sometimes through anger, sometimes through guilt, sometimes through a mix of all three within a single conversation. The strength of a boundary is not measured by how the other person reacts to it. It is measured by how consistently you keep it for yourself, regardless of the pushback you receive. Over time, that consistency rebuilds the inner authority that manipulation tried to take away from you piece by piece until it becomes second nature again. It also helps to avoid unnecessary confrontation during this stage. Many survivors feel a strong pull to explain themselves, to prove their side, to finally make the narcissistic person understand. This urge is deeply human, and it usually comes from hoping that being understood will finally bring closure, as though the right words could unlock some final resolution. But closure in these situations rarely comes from the other person. It comes from within you, built slowly through your own understanding rather than theirs. Repeated confrontations often just give them more material to twist, more chances to distort things, more openings for emotional escalation. Sometimes the strongest response is a quiet one. Sometimes the most freeing choice is to stop trying to be understood by someone whose understanding was never safe to begin with. Rebuilding your identity is maybe the most tender part of this entire journey. After a long period of manipulation, many survivors realize they do not fully recognize themselves anymore. Preferences, opinions, dreams, even small everyday habits may have been quietly shaped around someone else's moods until it becomes hard to tell which parts were ever truly your own. Reclaiming your identity is a slow and curious process built out of small questions. What do you actually enjoy? What do you actually believe? What kind of rest do you really need? What kind of people make you feel more like yourself? There is no need to answer all of these at once. Even revisiting one small question a day can slowly bring pieces of yourself back into focus. Asking these questions gently and often slowly rebuilds the inner world that was quietly rearranged without your full consent. Self-validation becomes the foundation of this rebuilding. For a long time, you may have needed someone else's confirmation just to trust your own experiences. Healing means learning to give that confirmation to yourself without waiting for permission from anyone else. When a memory comes up, you can acknowledge it. When a feeling rises, you can honor it. When your intuition speaks, you can listen without needing proof first. This does not mean shutting yourself off from feedback. It simply means you stop handing your reality over to people who have already shown you they will distort it. Support systems matter a lot during this time, but quality matters far more than quantity. A small number of people who can truly listen without judgment, who can hold space without trying to fix you, who can believe you without needing every detail explained, are worth more than a large crowd of well-meaning but confused observers. Even one or two people who consistently show up for you can make an enormous difference in how safe healing feels. Professional support from a trauma-informed therapist, when it is available to you, can be especially valuable because the patterns found in narcissistic abuse are specific and benefit from that kind of specialized understanding. If therapy is not accessible right now, that does not mean healing is out of reach. Books written by people who understand these dynamics, support groups made up of other survivors, and honest conversations with people you trust can all provide pieces of the same kind of understanding. What matters most is that the people and resources around you actually validate your experience rather than minimize it. Not everyone will understand what you went through, and that is all right. You do not need everyone to understand. You only need a few steady voices that remind you what you already know is true. As your clarity grows stronger, you will start noticing red flags much earlier in future relationships. Not out of paranoia, but with quiet discernment. You will sense when someone's words do not match their actions. You will notice when affection starts to feel conditional. You will recognize when curiosity about you is actually just information gathering. You will feel the difference between people who respect your boundaries and people who quietly test them, sometimes before you have even consciously named what you are noticing. This is not hypervigilance. This is wisdom that has slowly settled into your body, becoming a natural part of how you move through the world now. It may take time to fully trust this new awareness. At first, you might second-guess it, wondering if you are reading too much into small things. But over time, as this awareness proves itself right again and again, you will start to trust it the same way you trust any other reliable instinct. This does not mean every relationship going forward will be perfect or that you will never make mistakes in judging people. It simply means you now have tools you did not have before and a level of self-awareness that will keep serving you long after this particular chapter has closed. If you have made it this far and something inside you feels like it is beginning to settle, beginning to clarify, beginning to remember itself again, I want to invite you once more to follow this channel and stay close to this work. Healing from narcissistic abuse is never just one moment of realization. It is a long, layered, deeply personal process. And having steady, thoughtful guidance along the way can make a real difference. This channel exists for exactly that reason, to walk alongside you through the stages of recovery, to give language to experiences that have felt unspeakable for far too long, and to remind you that emotional freedom is not only possible, it is already beginning, even now, in the quiet way you are choosing to understand yourself more deeply. Remember that knowledge is not the end of healing, it is only the beginning of freedom. The moment you understood the manipulation was the moment its grip started to loosen, even if your heart has not fully caught up with your mind yet. The narcissistic person may keep reacting, escalating, softening, performing, disappearing, and returning. They may keep trying to rewrite the past and reshape the present, but none of that defines your recovery. Your recovery is defined by the slow, steady return to yourself. By the moments when you choose your own perception over their version of events. By the quiet decisions to rest,